A shift that started like any other in a Chicago emergency room ended with a nurse face to face with her most painful past. When an injured shooter was brought in unconscious after a shooting, no one could imagine what was coming. As she turned the man's body to assess his wounds, she saw something that made her heart stop. A tattoo identical to the one she had drawn years ago for someone who was supposed to be dead. What this nurse discovered that night not only changed her life, but revealed family secrets that had been buried for over a decade. This is a true story about identity, forgiveness, and bonds that not even death can break. I remember the exact moment everything changed. It was a Saturday night in Chicago, the kind of night where the emergency room becomes a war zone. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I rushed between patients, my scrubs already stained with blood that wasn't mine. I had been working as an emergency room nurse for 12 years, and I thought I had seen everything. Gun violence in Chicago wasn't new to me. Every weekend brought the same tragic pattern. Young men arriving on stretchers, families screaming in the waiting room, the smell of gunpowder mixed with antiseptic. But that night was different. Around 11:30, paramedics burst through the doors with a man on a gurney. He was unconscious, gunshot wound to the abdomen. The police were right behind them, their radios crackling with codes I had learned to interpret over the years. This wasn't just another victim. This was the shooter, the man who had opened fire at a convenience store during an attempted robbery. 2 people were injured, and he had been shot by the store owner in self-defense. My colleagues exchanged uncomfortable glances. There's an unspoken tension when you have to save someone who caused harm to others. But I learned long ago that in the emergency room, everyone is just a patient. My job isn't to judge. My job is to save lives. I approached the gurney, my hands already moving on autopilot, checking vital signs, preparing IV lines. His face was young, maybe late 20s, with a scar across his left eyebrow. His breathing was shallow and rapid. We had minutes, maybe less, to stabilize him before he went into shock. Dr. Reynolds called out orders, and I responded with the precision that comes from years of training. Cut the shirt, assess the wound, apply pressure, start fluids. That's when I had to turn him slightly to check for exit wounds. Standard procedure. I rolled him to his side and my hands froze. There, on his right shoulder blade, partially hidden by dried blood, was a tattoo. Not just any tattoo. A compass rose intertwined with a phoenix, rising from flames. The design was intricate, almost delicate, with tiny details that most people wouldn't notice. But I noticed, because I had drawn that exact design 15 years ago, with colored pencils on notebook paper, sitting on the floor of our tiny apartment in Detroit. I had drawn it for my little brother, Marcus, 2 weeks before he died. The room seemed to tilt. The sounds around me became muffled, like I was underwater. Someone called my name, but I couldn't respond. My little brother had died in an apartment fire when he was 13 years old. I was 18, already enrolled in nursing school, planning to bring him to live with me as soon as I got my own place. The fire had consumed everything. They told me his body was identified through dental records because the burns were too severe. I attended his funeral. I watched them lower a closed casket into the ground. And now, 15 years later, that tattoo was staring back at me from the shoulder of an unconscious shooter in my emergency room. If this story has already grabbed you, go ahead and subscribe to the channel now, because what comes next is going to surprise you even more. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching this from? I want to know who's following this journey with me. I don't know how I managed to continue working for the next hour. My hands moved mechanically, following procedures I could do in my sleep, but my mind was screaming. The tattoo was impossible. It wasn't just similar, it was identical. Every detail, every line, every shade. The phoenix's wings had 7 distinct feathers. The compass pointed northwest. There was a tiny star hidden in the flames that I had added at the last minute. A secret detail that Marcus loved. All of it was there. Dr. Reynolds noticed something was wrong. He pulled me aside after we stabilized the patient and sent him to surgery. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I wanted to tell him. I wanted to scream that I had seen a ghost, literally. But how could I explain without sounding insane? Instead, I mumbled something about being tired and asked to take my break. He nodded, concerned, and told me to take as much time as I needed. I locked myself in the staff bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide with shock. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and scrolled through my photos until I found what I was looking for, a picture of the original drawing. I had photographed it years ago, one of the few things I saved from my childhood. I zoomed in on every detail, comparing it to the mental image burned into my brain from that tattoo. They were the same, exactly the same. 3 possibilities raced through my mind. First, maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe someone else had drawn something similar, but the odds of that were astronomical. That tiny star alone, hidden in the flames, was something something I had never seen in any other tattoo. Second, maybe Marcus had shown the design to someone before he died, and that person had gotten it tattooed. But Marcus was 13. He didn't have friends who were getting tattoos. And third, the possibility I was afraid to even consider. What if Marcus wasn't dead? Thank you for sticking with me this far. It shows that you feel what I felt when I lived through all of this. So go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell, because what comes next changes everything. I splashed cold water on my face and tried to calm down. I needed to think rationally. I was a nurse, trained to deal with emergencies, to make quick decisions under pressure. But this wasn't a medical emergency. This was personal, and it was tearing me apart. I dried my face and made a decision. I needed to see that tattoo again. I needed to be sure I hadn't imagined it in the chaos of the moment. The patient was in surgery, which meant I had time. I went to the nurse's station and pulled up his chart on the computer. His name was listed as David Thompson, 28 years old, no fixed address. The police report said he had a criminal record, mostly minor offenses, nothing violent until tonight. There was a photo attached from his driver's license. I stared at the face on the screen, searching for any resemblance to my brother. The features were different, older, harder, weathered by life on the streets, but there was something in the eyes, something familiar that made my stomach clench. I checked the surgery schedule. He would be in the OR for at least another 2 hours. Then he'd go to recovery, and eventually to the ICU if he survived. I had time to investigate. But investigate what? I couldn't exactly walk into the OR and demand to see his tattoo again. I needed to be smart about this. I needed evidence. I pulled up the medical photos taken during intake. Standard procedure for trauma cases. We photograph all injuries and identifying marks. I scrolled through the images, my heart pounding, until I found it. There it was. The tattoo, captured in high resolution. I downloaded the image to my phone and zoomed in. Every detail confirmed what I already knew. This was my drawing. This was the design I had created for Marcus. But how? And why? I sat at the computer, staring at the screen, feeling like my entire reality was crumbling. Everything I thought I knew about my brother's death was suddenly in question. The funeral, the closed casket, the grief that had shaped my entire adult life. What if it had all been a lie? My phone buzzed with a text from my colleague asking if I was coming back. I glanced at the time. I had been gone for 20 minutes. I needed to pull myself together and get back to work. But I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had just split into before and after this moment. Before I saw that tattoo, and after. Nothing would ever be the same again. To understand why that tattoo shattered my world, you need to know about Marcus. My little brother wasn't just family. He was my responsibility, my purpose. Our childhood in Detroit was the kind that leaves scars you can't see. Our father left when I was 7, and Marcus was 2. Our mother worked 3 jobs to keep us fed, which meant she was never home. By the time I was 10, I was raising Marcus. I made his meals, helped with homework, walked him to school. We were more than siblings. We were survivors. Marcus was brilliant, not in the conventional way that gets you good grades, though he was smart enough when he tried. He was creative, always drawing, always imagining worlds beyond our cramped apartment in the worst part of the city. While other kids his age were getting into gangs, Marcus was sketching intricate designs in notebooks he found in dumpsters. He said art was his escape, his way of building a better world on paper, since he couldn't change the real one. When I turned 18 and got accepted into nursing school with a full scholarship, I made a promise to Marcus: 2 years. Give me 2 years to get through school and get a job, and then I'd get us out of there. I'd get an apartment where he'd have his own room, art supplies, a real chance. He was 13 then, still young enough to avoid the worst of street life, still innocent enough to believe in my promise. We spent hours planning our future. He'd finish high school, maybe go to art school. I'd work as a nurse, and we'd take care of Mom together. That's when he asked me to design him a tattoo. He said when he turned 18, he wanted to get it as a symbol of survival, of making it out. I was surprised because Marcus had always been afraid of needles, but he was serious. He wanted something meaningful, so I spent a week working on it. The compass represented finding our way out, choosing our own direction instead of being trapped by circumstance. The phoenix rising from flames represented rebirth, starting over, becoming something better than what we were born into. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this story from? Write it in the comments. It's incredible to see people from so many places following stories like this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because you need to hear what happens next. The tiny star hidden in the flames was our secret. It represented hope, the kind that isn't obvious, that you have to look closely to find. Marcus loved it. He folded that drawing and kept it in his wallet. Said he looked at it every day to remind himself why he had to stay strong. 2 weeks later, I moved into a dorm room 2 hours away to start school. I called him every night. We made plans for winter break when I'd come home. Everything was going according to plan. Then I got the call. It was 3 a.m, middle of my second week of classes. Our neighbor's voice on the phone, frantic and crying. There had been a fire. The entire floor of our apartment building had gone up in flames. They said it started from faulty wiring in the unit next to ours. By the time the fire department arrived, it was too late. Our mother had been at work. Marcus had been home alone. He never made it out. I remember the drive back to Detroit. I remember the numbness, the disbelief. I remember arriving at the morgue and being told I couldn't see the body. The burns were too severe. They identified him through dental records. I remember the funeral, the closed casket covered in white lilies. I remember standing at the grave, holding our mother who couldn't stop sobbing, and making a vow. I would become the best nurse I could be. I would save lives in his memory. Every patient I helped would be a way of honoring the little brother I couldn't save. For 15 years I carried that grief. It shaped every decision I made. I specialized in emergency medicine because I wanted to be there for people in their worst moments, the way I wasn't there for Marcus. I worked in the most dangerous neighborhoods, treated gunshot victims and overdoses and trauma cases because I felt like I owed something to the universe. I never married, never had children of my own. How could I, when I had failed the one person who depended on me most? And now, 15 years later, I was staring at his tattoo on a stranger's body. Or maybe not a stranger. Maybe the brother I had mourned all these years. The impossibility of it was crushing, but so was the hope. What if he had survived? What if everything I believed about his death was wrong? What if I had grieved for nothing? The questions spiraled in my mind as I went through the motions of my shift, waiting for surgery to end, waiting to see that man's face again when he woke up. The surgery took 3 hours. I spent that time doing what I do best, working and thinking. I couldn't approach this emotionally. I needed facts, evidence, proof that I wasn't losing my mind. So I started investigating quietly, using resources available to me at the hospital. I went back to the patient's chart, David Thompson. I searched for any connection to Detroit, to my family name, to Marcus. His emergency contact was listed as none, just an address for a halfway house. His history showed 2 previous admissions, always with no insurance or contact. He was a ghost in the system. I analyzed the intake photos. The man had the same dark brown eyes and slight cleft in his chin as Marcus at 13, but his nose and jaw looked different. Features change, but this much? I needed more. I remembered the fingerprints, but requesting them would raise questions. Then I had another idea. Dental records. That's how they identified Marcus after the fire. If this man was my brother, the records shouldn't match. If he wasn't, I was chasing ghosts. David's records didn't contain anything helpful. I was stuck. I needed to see him, to ask about the tattoo, but he was unconscious. I felt insane. I went back to the staff break room and compared the few photos I had of Marcus with David's driver's license photo. The eyes were identical. The smile had the same crooked quality, but years of hard living had taken their toll. My shift supervisor found me and said the patient was in the ICU, waking up. She asked if I would take him, referring to the fact that he was an aggressor. I said yes. I had to be there. I went to room 7. He was hooked up to monitors, vitals stable. I stood at the foot of his bed, watching him breathe. I studied his hands. Marcus had a small scar on his left thumb from when he tried to carve wood at age 10. I didn't see it immediately. I moved closer, adjusting his IV. His hand was rough, covered in new scars, but there on the thumb, barely visible, was a thin white line. My breath caught that scar. The same one, the same length, the same position. The tattoo, the eyes, the chin, the scar. It was him. It had to be him. But how? Why? He woke up at 4:17 in the morning. His eyes opened, and for a moment, nothing. Then his eyes widened with recognition and shock. He tried to sit up in a panic, but the pain stopped him. I gently pushed him back down. Don't move. You just had surgery. He stared at me as if I were a ghost. Marcus, I said. A question, a prayer, an accusation. He flinched. I saw the tattoo. I drew that tattoo. Either you tell me how you have it, or you tell me what I already know. He finally faced me, tears streaming. Sarah. He used my real name. You weren't supposed to see me like this. You weren't supposed to see me at all. His voice was rough, but it was his. All doubt vanished. My brother was alive, and he had let me believe he was dead for 15 years. Anger hit me. You let me think you were dead. I went to your funeral, Marcus. How could you do that to me? He closed his eyes. I didn't have a choice. The fire wasn't an accident. It was set by people I owed money to, he began. I got involved with a gang at 13. I witnessed something that could have sent important people to prison. They said they'd kill our whole family if I talked. The fire was a warning. I was supposed to die that night, but another kid pulled me out a window. He took me to people who could hide me, give me a new identity. They said the only way to keep you and Mom safe was if everyone thought I was dead. They found a body, an unclaimed kid from a morgue, same age. They burned it and made sure it was identified as me. What about Mom? Does she know you're alive? He shook his head. Nobody knows. I've been living as David Thompson for 15 years. I never stopped thinking about you. Getting your drawing tattooed was my way of carrying you with me. I was reeling. He was forced into this life to to protect us. The shooting tonight, were you running from them? He nodded. I thought enough time had passed, but they found me. I needed money to disappear again. I tried to rob that store. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, I swear, but the owner had a gun and he was faster than me. I should have been angry, but I was overwhelmed by grief for the stolen years. I held his hand, the one with the scar. We'll figure this out, I told him. You said they found a body. Who helped you? He shifted in the bed. The kid who pulled me out worked for a man named Raymond Cruz. He ran off the book's witness protection. He created David Thompson and switched the dental records. He paused, then said, Sarah, there's something else. About Mom. My heart sank. Our mother had died 5 years ago. She knew I was alive. The word struck me. Cruz contacted her 6 months after the fire. He told her I was alive, but she could never see me or tell anyone, including you, if she wanted to keep me safe. She chose life. I stood up. She knew. All those years she let me grieve, and she knew. He was pained. She was protecting you. Cruz said the fewer people who knew, the safer we'd be. The people after me knew about you. They would have used you to get to me. My mother, whom I had comforted through years of grief, knew it was a lie. I sat back down. He told me what he saw. A murder. The shooter was a cop's son. His testimony would have exposed massive corruption. So, they've been looking for you this whole time? He shook his head. Not actively. Not anymore. But I can never stay in one place too long. Chicago was supposed to be far enough away. And tonight? I asked. I saw one of them 2 weeks ago. I panicked. I tried to rob that store. It was a stupid decision. I looked at my brother, this stranger with a familiar face. The police are going to press charges. Armed robbery. This isn't just going to go away. I know, he said with resignation. Maybe this is how it ends. But Sarah, seeing you tonight, even like this, it's worth it. I've missed you every single day for 15 years. That tattoo, it reminded me there was a time when I had dreams, and that person was you. I left the room as the sun rose. My shift was over, but I couldn't go home. I had a professional obligation to report a patient's false identity in a crime. But this was Marcus. If I reported him, he'd be imprisoned and vulnerable. If I didn't, I was complicit. I called Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the hospital's ethics consultant. I told her everything in a coffee shop. Legally, you should report it. Ethically, I'm not so sure. There's professional duty, and there's the ethics of family, of context. She asked, what does your heart tell you? Which choice can you live with? I thought of my mother, consumed by the guilt of her secret. I didn't want to become like her, but I also couldn't bear the thought of Marcus in prison. My phone rang. The hospital. Marcus was asking for me. He had told the doctor he needed to speak with his emergency contact and gave them my name. I raced back, my mind spinning. When I entered the room, he looked calmer, more resolve. I've been thinking, he said, about what you said, about figuring this out together. I don't want you to carry this burden. I don't want you to compromise your principles because